Hi, I'm Dr. Lloyd Corder. Welcome to week 2 of Nonverbal Communication, the video introduction to this week's materials and topics. This session is focused on what we call vital signs, and you'll be reading about that in your textbook. And I want to spend just a couple minutes kind of giving you an overview and some things to consider and think about as you move forward. First of all, there are 5 or 6 topics that you're going to be reading about in the book. And these are all things related to our body: the skin, muscles, heart, blood pressure, respiration, and the brain. Let's think about these for a minute. If we talk about things like the skin, what do we know about the skin? As I mentioned in the first video, our bodies are made up of salt and a bunch of other chemicals, water, all sorts of things, and we conduct electricity. And so what we know is that when we're scared, our salt levels seem to go up, versus when they're relaxed, they seem to go down. So one of the things we can do is measure how much electricity is being pushed through our particular bodies at our time, and it tells us something about our mood. This may even be below our level of awareness. You think you go to a doctor's office, they give you different tests, exams, so on and so forth. A lot of things you don't even know are wrong with you. A lot of people don't even know that they're sick, but our body is communicating areas where we're doing well, where we need to make improvements, or we're having issues, or we need to watch out for, that sort of thing. Another area are your muscles. If you use your muscles a lot and you work out, you realize that you get lactic acid almost every time you work out. You get sore, and it takes a while to work those things out, so you feel them. But muscles also communicate other things. They have memory. A lot of people that work out, if they quit working out for a week or two, they seem to get in shape much more quickly, or back in shape much more quickly than someone who's never worked out before. It's like the muscles remember what's going on. Sometimes people have traumatic events that have happened in their lives, and they go and they look at or remember things from their different experiences. Maybe their neck or something tenses up. And that ties with another thing with the muscles: stress. The more stress we have, the more it looks like something like this. You can see that the person's face is tight, or their back is tight. And so it communicates all sorts of things about our state of being, whether we're relaxed or tense. How about our heart? If you've ever been to a doctor or had to buy life insurance or something, they typically hook you up to an EKG machine, and you see what your heart rate's like. And is it beating normally? And there's all sorts of readings that go on with that. So the EKG tells us how much stress you're having. It's interesting reading in the book, if you will, and you may even know people like this, that a lot of people, you might have heard this phrase, they're being crushed, they're dying because of a broken heart. Sometimes people's emotions are so difficult and so challenging that they end up dying because of how they are feeling. They have a heartache. So even in our vocabulary, in our vernacular that we speak, we talk about how we're feeling, our emotions based on our body, our vital signs. Blood pressure is another one. Basically, if your blood pressure is too high, a lot of bad things eventually happen to you health-wise. And a lot of people do things to relax, try to control their blood pressure so that we don't blow ourselves up, so to speak. Respiration, or your breathing rates. Are people huffing and puffing and carrying on? Are they out of breath? Are they sweating? These are all things that indicate stress versus if they're totally relaxed. And then finally, the brain emits brain waves all the time. If you're really active and you're thinking, you'll see that that's something called beta. If you're meditating, it's alpha. If you're sleeping, it's theta. And if you go too long, deep sleep, it's called delta. And if you get all the way down to 0 on these readings, what ends up happening is you essentially are dead, or at least brain dead. So we have all of these things happening in terms of our body and emotion that we need to consider. Now look at this graph for a second. There's a couple applications of this might be interesting. Here's somebody getting ready to work out, and they have a heart rate monitor. And so this is starting to give them biofeedback about their body and what their optimum rate should be. And if their heart rate right here gets up too high, then they need to slow down. Some people can feel this more or less on their own. Others swear by a heart rate monitor because it keeps them in the zone. They either need to work harder to get their heart rate where they want it, or they need to slow down so they don't hurt themselves. Here's a polygraph. Poly means multiple, so they've got little finger readings. They've got, looks like a blood pressure reading. Looks like they've got heart rate readings, and it comes up on here a computer. And so we call this a lie detector test. And what happens is we ask this person baseline questions, and then more information, and eventually we find out when we ask them a difficult question, we see is that difficult question reading higher or differently than those baseline questions that were easy. And if they are, they're feeling more stress, and you feel more stress when you're lying. That's how the theory goes. So just a couple examples that you might find out there in the world, and there are many, many others. And then finally, the other thing we want to talk about in terms of our body and vital signs and all of that, when we think about the emotions, we're thinking about three things in my mind that Aristotle put together several thousand years ago. And we call them ethos, logos, and pathos. So ethos, one big part of persuasion, and when you're trying to persuade somebody else, is your personal credibility, who you are as a person or speaker. What, do you do what you say? Are you the kind of person that's going to get things done? People will constantly evaluate your credibility. And that sometimes the position can increase that credibility if you're a senior executive of a major firm, or if you're you're an athlete or whatever, you're on the right team. All of those things can tie to credibility. There's another type. Logos has really two meanings. One is with the power of the word, so it would define a particular person or situation. So let me give you an example. Here in Pittsburgh, there's a neighborhood called the Hill District, and they're working really hard to improve it. When somebody walks into the Hill District for the first time, if they're in a bad section, and this is just down from the University of Pittsburgh's campus, and they don't know it, they'd see weeds growing out of the side of buildings and trash laying around everywhere. It wouldn't take them long to say this place is a ghetto. If your goal was to sell property in the Hill District, calling it a ghetto probably isn't your best strategy. We want to rename that to something better. So what if I came up with the name redevelopment zone, or opportunity zone, or some other word that isn't ghetto? Because ghetto would have negative connotations. It'd be something you want to run from, stay away from. Redevelopment zone might indicate a bargain, that you're the first to get in, you're going to get a really good deal, and you're going to get big money back in the end. So logos helps us do that. So logos has the power of words. It also has the power of imagery, in terms of what people see and the credibility. And finally, there's pathos. Pathos is the feeling that people have or that you get in your argument. So if someone is a really impassioned speaker and they speak very visually and they really tug on your heartstrings, they have a lot of pathos in their ability to communicate with you. And so I think it's still apropos, Aristotle's old model, to think about not only all our vital signs and how we would use that to get people excited about ideas and to get energy going and having great things happen, but gives us a little bit of a model. But more important than all of that, it's a framework in terms of nonverbal communication. We want to understand our body and our vital signs and what's really being communicated. So that's what this chapter is about. You're going to have a great time this week. There's some great discussion questions, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.